talked about if we had a top 10 list, I would feature Dan on there, but top 5, I don't think he is. But I want to have the conversation. If the season for the Lions doesn't go as expected, I'm not saying win 10 games and lose a playoff. I'm talking like 6 wins with full health. Everybody's healthy. It's a disaster. What does it mean for Dan Campbell, Sam? And you had him on your list. So explain your reasoning for Dan Campbell. Why is he on the hot seat if things don't go as planned?
All right, because, and this is something that may be unfair to Dan Campbell, but if you want to be a winning organization, a winning coach in the NFL, you have to deal with some pressure. The pressure got ramped up by a ton just going into this offseason versus the previous offseason. Obviously, there were a lot of questions about Dan Campbell in the beginning from myself, from a lot of people at this network, from a lot of fans. But to Dan Campbell's credit, he was able to lead this team on an 8-2 finish. He made a lot of moves throughout his tenure that I liked. My favorite being in season 1, actually, when the Lions were staring down the barrel of a winless season, and he decides to go to his buddy Anthony Lynn and say, get out, and basically demote him. And then Ben Johnson was elevated to passing game coordinator. I thought that was a very, very good leader move. I think that I don't know exactly what tangibly firing Aubrey Pleasant did last year, but hey, it seemed to work. There must have been something wrong going there, and it kind of sparked the team. The thing, though, with Dan Campbell is, just imagine this town if the Lions, I would consider Dan Campbell to be 100% on the hot seat if they don't make the playoffs, which would be a complete disaster implosion. I think we would all agree.
I will say this. With Dan Campbell and what he took over, there's a lot of context that needs to be put and laid out, because after Matt Patricia left and the disaster that was gifted to Dan and what he's done in 2 seasons now with the Detroit Lions, I mean, you go from 3-13 to 9-8. Now, the reason why I don't believe he's on the hot seat as much as these other coaches, maybe he'd make a top 10 list, but top 5, I don't think so. There's plenty of other coaches that I think are higher on that list, and a big reason why is I don't think Sheila will fire him, especially 2 years now. It would be 3 years and this upcoming season into a 6-year contract. It would basically be Sheila admitting she was wrong and saying, you know what, he was a bad hire, let's just get it over with and fire him. I don't think that's going to happen. I think if Dan is fired, it would be the next 2 seasons or so. Now, they give Dan more time. Now, whether I agree with it or not is irrelevant. I'm telling you what I think will happen. Even if Dan comes out this year and let's say wins 7 games, everybody would be pissed. No doubt about it. The media would be eating it up, especially if the roster's majority healthy. But I don't think that immediately equates to Dan on the hot seat just yet. Now, context, there needs to be context. I think that's important. Now, if Jared goes down or one of your best players goes down, the offensive line breaks down, whatever happens, that has to have context, so something has to happen. But given everyone's healthy and they only win 7 games, unless Dan is shooting himself in the foot every game, which we've seen happen in the past, but if he's the reason you're losing a majority of these games, maybe you're correct. Mm-hmm. Maybe at that point it's like, all right, dude, you're the reason you're holding us back. I don't know if Sheila in ownership would be admitting they're wrong within 1 year from now. I just don't think it'll happen that quickly. But regardless, I agree with the point of you got to win. I mean, you have a good enough roster in the NFC. Everything's on your shoulders to win. But 3 years with what Dan's done with the culture, and I know those don't equate to wins, but what Dan's done for this organization so far, I don't know if he's earned it. They'll just get rid of him next season, if that makes sense. I think we'll have a little longer of a leash than people expect.